One of the most notoriously insane sagas in MMA history is currently happening between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, and this has been a 2-year plus saga that we have been entertained by, frustrated by. You can name the feeling that we've had with it, and I'm going to go over from the exact moment this whole thing started through almost every single detail throughout the saga and to where we currently are right now as of June 10th. 2025. Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, of course, have been on this little heated feud of Jon Jones refusing to fight Tom Aspinall, holding up the heavyweight division as thin as it already is, being held up with barely any fights towards the top. Guys like Curtis Blades having to fight guys that are debutants in Kuniev, Alexander Volkov, Gelton Almeida, Cyril Gane, all holding out. Sergey Pavlovich also doesn't have a fight. We have all these top heavyweights with no fights, all waiting to see what happens towards the top. An interim champion, now the longest reigning interim champion in UFC history. Jon Jones nearing the longest reigning heavyweight champion in UFC history. All because a complete malfunction by the UFC in losing control over a situation because they no longer have the guts to do anything about it. And they never have been when it comes to Jon Jones. Moving forward, let's go over how this whole thing started. Jon Jones, of course, moving up to heavyweight, arguably ducking Francis Ngannou for a 3-year hiatus as he bulked up to go to heavyweight. Ends up fighting Cyril Gane in, I believe, March 4, 2023, where he submits Cyril Gane within a couple of minutes via guillotine against the cage, where Cyril Gane honestly made one of the dumbest defensive grappling moves, and he was very blatantly overwhelmed by the moment, looked pretty horrible on the feet, ended up getting taken down, defended this guillotine, and Jon Jones ended up submitting him. Jon Jones ends up being the heavyweight champion, now a 2-division champion in the UFC, after vacating the belt, robbing Dominic Reyes blindly in that division. And Dominic Reyes not getting and ever becoming a UFC champion because of that. And Jon Jones is now a 2-division champion at heavyweight, where he's starting to reach the latter end of his career, getting a little bit older. And he's looking to defend this championship belt. This is where we have this conversation where who is Jon Jones' first ever defense going to be? Because a lot of people thought Cyril Gane was going to win. And so it was a pretty decent overall win for Jon Jones. Of course, in hindsight now, Cyril Gane not necessarily the greatest of wins, but at the time, of course, was relatively highly touted, although Francis Ngannou out-grappled him, so don't understand why it was that big of a surprise when Jon Jones out-grappled him. Anyways, moving forward, Francis Ngannou also out-grappled Cyril Gane on a bad knee. But anyways, Jon Jones ends up submitting Cyril Gane, and then we get Tom Aspinall fighting Marcin Tybura in London, knocking him out cold within a minute and some, and he ends up getting a pretty big win in his career, coming back from a gigantic injury against Curtis Blades, where he fought in London the time prior and tore his ACL or whatever it was in his knee, a completely nasty, insane injury that cost him that fight and his actual first loss in the UFC. So Tom Aspinall has a pretty big win here, and now we have Jon Jones looking for his first title defense, where Sergey Pavlovich was actually the heavyweight that was more than most notoriously known to be the guy at the time, the most dangerous guy at the time. But Jon Jones was booked against Stipe Miocic at UFC 295 as he wanted to fight Stipe Miocic, the greatest heavyweight of all time versus the greatest light heavyweight of all time. It's been a discussion. And of course, Jon Jones had mentioned it while he's trying to move up to heavyweight. At the time, he tried to move up to heavyweight. Of course, in 2020, Stipe Miocic, I believe, was the UFC champion at the time for heavyweight. Then, he got knocked out cold by Francis Ngannou, where Francis Ngannou was Stipe Miocic's last win. So the 3-year hiatus that Jon Jones took, Francis Ngannou became the heavyweight champion of the world, defended it against Cyril Gane, had a whole debacle with the UFC, and is no longer in the UFC now. So we did end up getting Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, booked for November 11th in 2023 for UFC 295. Jon Jones ends up getting injured for UFC 295, and he had to pull out because of a torn pec, I believe. Ended up showing a video about it. It was a pretty bad injury. Ended up having him held out for at least 8 months. We did not get this event. Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira saved the card. Ended up being the main event for the card, which is a fantastic fight. But regarding the heavyweight division, regarding of what happened with the heavyweight title, since Jon Jones is going to be out for a very long time, did they strip him like they stripped Jamal Hill because Jamal Hill got injured? Did they strip him like they stripped Yuri Prochazka when Yuri Prochazka got injured? No. Jon Jones ends up keeping the belt. They make an interim title fight between Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich, where Pavlovich, of course, like I said, was the guy, and Tom Aspinall was indeed the up-and-comer guy, just came back from a big injury, knocked out Tabora within a minute or so. Basically, everybody Tom Aspinall has fought, apart from that gigantic injury against Blades, has been finished within the first round or so, barring Andrei Arlovsky, who got submitted in the second. So gigantic fight here where Pavlovich looks like the boogeyman of the division, knocking everybody out that stands his way and smothering them any time they step in his way. Whereas you have Tom Aspinall also doing essentially the same thing, but Pavlovich was more the demeaning, scary guy where Aspinall held his chin up in the air. Pavlovich took some nasty shots from a couple different guys, and he was perfectly fine. Ate those like it was nothing. And so this is a sick fight. A lot of people thought Pavlovich was going to win. I think it was evenly lined out. And Pavlovich was the guy that people thought Jon should have fought at the time, not Stipe Miocic coming off of a Francis Ngannou loss, 3 to 4 year layoff, right? It made no sense, especially with how old Stipe is. And Stipe holding off for that long, not doing anything since. Then you get Tom Aspinall knocking out Sergey Pavlovich on that same card that Jones was supposed to fight against Stipe Miocic. Tom Aspinall becomes the interim heavyweight champion of the world, and now, rightfully so, should be the number one contender moving forward, as opposed to, again, another Stipe Miocic holding out. And also, by the way, this fight was offered to Stipe Miocic, and he turned down fighting Tom Aspinall for the interim heavyweight champion of the world. Of course, Stipe Miocic wanted to fight immediately for the title against an older Jon Jones, not a younger, explosive Tom Aspinall. And Tom Aspinall, in the meantime, while Jones was hurt, actually defended his heavyweight interim championship. Yes, he defended the interim title while Jon Jones was waiting and recovering from injury. The problem with this defense in July was that Jon Jones ended up getting booked against Stipe Miocic for UFC 309, November 16, 2024. So about a full year after Jon Jones was booked against Stipe Miocic, Miocic ends up not taking the fight against Aspinall for the interim title, holding out. Aspinall defends the interim title after winning it, beating the scariest guy in the division, in Sergey Pavlovich at the time, and then defending it against Curtis Blaydes, the guy he got injured against. 2 top 5 heavyweights at the time. Miocic holds out, has not fought in 4 or so years, and ends up getting a title shot immediately against Jon Jones, still after denying an interim title shot against Tom Aspinall. So Aspinall being disrespected once again, mainly essentially the first time he's been disrespected by the UFC here with this matchmaking, because at the time they made the first fight, it was mainly Sergey Pavlovich that was kind of warranted for the title shot. Didn't really seem like Aspinall coming off of a Tabora knockout would get one. But this is where we start getting into the very interesting portions of the Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall fiasco, right? This little debacle that we've had and going on for a year and a half or 2 or so. Jon Jones fighting Stipe Miocic November 16 ends up being, highly attempted in marketing by the UFC, where I think this is like the hardest the UFC has tried in promoting a fight within the last couple of years. Especially considering how bad they've been with 2025 promotion. Even throughout 2024, the promotion was horrible, but they did everything they could to promote this. So, the 2-division champion, Jon Jones, 2-time heavyweight champion, Stipe Miocic, the greatest heavyweight of all time versus the greatest of all time, not just the greatest light heavyweight, the greatest of all time. So, is the greatest of all time also going to be the greatest heavyweight of all time? Basically, everything possible to cement Jon Jones with every name you could possibly put in his record and his resume of being the greatest, right? Most championship fight wins. You can see it on the screen with that poster. Jon Jones ends up finishing Stipe Miocic in UFC 309 with a pretty nasty spinning wheel kick to the body, which Jon Jones called a liver kick. It was the complete opposite side. But yeah, Jon Jones ends up finishing an old Stipe Miocic. They actually didn't look that good on the feet. Jones is actually getting a bit tagged against a 42-year-old senile Stipe Miocic. Miocic looked horrible on the mat, looked horrible to take down defense. Speed looked literally disgusting. As slow as it gets, as bad as it gets, and as big of a showcase of an undeserved title fight, an unwarranted title fight, and a disgusting booking by the UFC in and of itself. And Aspinall, of course, would have been the much better fight. This is in November of 2024. Then Jon Jones goes on the mic. Joe Rogan asks him what's next, talking about retirement. He mentioned Alex Pereira more than he mentioned Tom Aspinall. But Rogan did indeed say Tom Aspinall's name, and they pan to Aspinall in the crowd. Jon Jones completely ignores everything that Joe Rogan said, did not mention a single name, did not mention Tom Aspinall, who was in the crowd sipping on his drink, and Jones ends up thanking Jesus Christ. Well, good for him. He's a Christian man. He can thank who he wants, right? But completely dodging the question. Did not really say a single thing about Tom Aspinall, the interim champion that just defended the interim championship in the midst of Jon Jones not only taking his spot on the card the year before, and winning the interim title against the boogeyman of the division in Sergey Pavlovich, but then becoming the boogeyman of the division himself by going on defending it in July against Curtis Blades, which it's almost been a year since now Tom Aspinall has defended the light heavyweight, the interim title, since he's fought, right? So now we have Tom Aspinall, the longest reigning interim champion in UFC history. Not just heavyweight, in UFC history. Yes, the longest reigning. He has a title defense. He's been waiting for Jon Jones this entire time. Should have been booked against him. Defended this title in ridiculous notion, especially in 2025. This should never exist. And on top of that, Jon Jones is the second, pretty blurry picture, I got it off of Google is what it is, longest heavyweight title reign, second longest heavyweight title reign, surpassing Stipe Miocic, and he's second longest compared behind Cain Velasquez. That's ridiculous. One title defense, second longest reigning heavyweight of all time. That is absurd. Worst part about it is since March 4, 2023, as of today, June 10, 2025, it has been 829 days since Jon Jones has been heavyweight champion. 829 days. As you can see with Cain Velasquez, 896 days. In about, 67 days. In 67 days or 68 days, Jon Jones will be the longest reigning heavyweight champion of all time. Just over 2 months from now, on August 17, 2025. The fact that Jon Jones would have had one title defense by then, he will not have fought Tom Aspinall by this date. He will more than likely still be holding on to the heavyweight championship by then. He's going to be the longest reigning heavyweight champion with one title defense. He will surpass Cain Velasquez's title reign. I get it. Like, Cain Velasquez didn't have so many defenses at the end of the day, but he was fighting. He was not ducking the number one contender. He was not evading the number one contender. He did not defend against a 42-year-old that had waited for 4+ years to fight, ducked an interim title shot just to get the same exact title shot he did not deserve a year later, while the interim champion gets snubbed and ends up defending his interim title on top of that. Jon Jones then goes on to some absurd run where he's asking for $30 million to fight Tom Aspinall. And Joe Rogan ends up saying on his podcast, Ariel Helwani was talking about there was a load of sum that Jon Jones had asked for and that the UFC had even accepted. Jon Jones also said he wanted 6 months to fight Tom Aspinall. He wanted 6 months by the time the fight was announced, signed, sealed, and done to train. So even now, if he were to sign it right now, it would not happen in 2025. That's how long Jon Jones is claiming he wants to train, alongside a $30 million flat paycheck. You get Ariel Helwani talking about this as well, saying that Jon Jones asked for a number, the UFC got him it. Dana White just recently went on the post-UFC 316 fight press conference, where he got bombarded with Jon Jones questions, amongst other questions, of course, but mainly the Jon Jones-Tom Aspinall conversation, because it's the heavyweight champion of the world being stalled. And the heavyweight championship has been a very stalled division. Stipe Miocic was not that active of a champion when he was champion, especially towards the latter end of his career. Francis Ngannou was supposed to make that a difference, and then he defended once against Cyril Gane, and he had his whole issue with the UFC, and that started stalling it out. Jon Jones obviously waiting 3 years or so and hadn't fought Francis Ngannou while this whole thing was happening, definitely delayed it a little bit. Ngannou ends up vacating. They had to make a title opportunity for them. Cyril Gane, after not beating anybody, after losing to Francis Ngannou, gets right back in there. And then he fights Jon Jones. And now Jon Jones has one title defense since winning it in 2023, March of 2023, so over 2 years. And Jon Jones has had one title defense, and it was against Stipe Miocic, who did not deserve it whatsoever, while the interim champion, again, defended the title that he won in November, replacing the undisputed champion in Jon Jones, where Stipe Miocic, the guy that got the shot over him, ducked for the interim title. Do you see where I'm getting with this? It's as blasphemous, as blatantly horrible as it's ever gotten. Anyways, moving forward with it, Jon Jones asked for a number. The UFC said you could have that number. He said he was in, and then he said he was out. Jon Jones completely went back on his word. Dana White's completely telling the truth, saying that Jon Jones accepted the fight. He agreed to the fight. He offered the deal, and the UFC accepted the deal, and Jones accepted it as well. Or Jones was offered a deal, and he accepted it. He just didn't sign the contract. That's what Dana said. Dana White was trying to play dumb to everything. Jon Jones went on a complete AWOL run on like a lunatic run on Twitter, where he was losing his mind, trying to diminish everything about Tom Aspinall's reign. This is very, very recent right now where he was losing it. And this is what they were asking Dana White about in the press conference. And Jon Jones even said, they won't strip me. I couldn't care less if they strip me. I'd vacate it before they strip me. That's what Jon Jones said. A little ego run saying that, oh, you can't take the belt off of me. I'm doing it. You can't fire me. I quit type thing, right? It's one of those where they want to go off on this little high horse. Jon Jones is so afraid to lose. So afraid to lose that he would rather believe it's his own decision, that he would rather make himself believe and lie and try to manipulate the circumstances to where he would have never lost if he did, that he could have just ran around and ran away with it. And now he's saying things on Twitter like he's 37 years old, his body's starting to hurt. Aspinall's not calling out anybody of his age group. Aspinall has knocked out a majority of the top 5, a majority of the top 10. He's been running through the entire division, defended his interim title. What more do you want the guy to do? The only guys he hasn't beaten in the top 5, I don't know if Jalil Almeida's in the top 5 yet. He hasn't fought him. He hasn't fought Cyril Gane, beating basically everybody else in the top 5. What more could Tom Aspinall do to warrant himself? And on top of that, he would probably be calling out the people in his division that are younger, that are his age group. But at the same time, Tom Aspinall's age isn't really getting any younger, waiting 2 years to fight for the title. On top of that, Tom Aspinall, his age isn't just sitting here waiting, getting better. And, he has the interim championship. Why would he not fight for the heavyweight title? Why would Jon Jones keep holding on to the heavyweight title? If Jon Jones wants to fight eventually, but not right now, why doesn't he just relinquish the title? Why doesn't the UFC strip him of the title? The UFC's lost control. They lose control of Jon Jones. They've never had control over Jon Jones. For whatever reason, no fighter in UFC history has been done more favors, has been granted this sort of leeway, and we've been getting the biggest ducking in the UFC history via Jon Jones against Tom Aspinall, to the point where Ariel Helwani is saying that Jon Jones has said he would be willing to fight, just not against Tom Aspinall in particular. And the fact that Jon Jones even tweeted out when there were any sort of rumors about Francis Ngannou coming back to the UFC and having some sort of interest in it, where Dana White completely shut down and said he probably wouldn't be interested in re-signing Francis Ngannou, Jon Jones tweeted out that, maybe Francis Ngannou, now that's a real fight. That's a real super fight. Champion versus champion. He used to hold the UFC belt, defended it, not just some guy in a hot streak with a hot mouth, referencing Tom Aspinall. This is the same guy who ducked Francis Ngannou when he was in the UFC, and now Jon Jones is tweeting something this pathetic and this delusional, and the sole basis of he knows that Francis Ngannou will never be back in the UFC. And so you have this whole basis now of Jones acting like he's calling out a beast and a freak in Francis Ngannou, who's, getting a little older, albeit though he would still never get back in the UFC, which is why Jones is trying to call him out, as opposed to saying Aspinall's name. And anytime he mentions Aspinall's name, he's diminishing him, saying Aspinall has no grappling, although he is a black belt, even though I say black belt isn't really much to merit in MMA. A heavyweight black belt's definitely something, and we've seen Aspinall with his grappling, maybe not off of his back, but we saw Aspinall submit Alexander Volkov, who, we've seen on the mat as of recent, hasn't really been that bad at all on the mat. So, pretty impressive submission, I would say, for Tom Aspinall in that one, and he's a pretty decent overall player on the mat, as we've seen again. I think this is hysterical from Jon Jones. I think it's been as bad as it gets. This is the biggest ducking in UFC history, as we are right now, waiting to see maybe Jon Jones fights him in Madison Square Garden. Maybe Jon Jones fights him in December. Dana White says he's very, very confident the fight still happens this year, but then he also saying you can't force a guy to fight. He wanted other guys to stay, like Khabib and DC and other people to not retire, and that didn't work out for him. So Dana White is now having some mixed signals, some mixed, mixed diction within his confidence and lack of confidence, maybe, in this fight happening. From super, super confident to still relatively confident, but a little bit a hindrance of the confident. He kind of slipped up during his press conference, didn't really say what he wanted to, didn't want to talk about a lot of these things, and you can tell Dana White's very avoidant nowadays, where, again, I don't understand why he's still the CEO, and if you guys are relinquishing this much power to one fighter, at this point, you're making the fighter bigger than the organization. And I'd say the only fighter in the history of the UFC that's been bigger than the organization is Conor McGregor, and that's rightfully so, because he made the organization. But yeah, it's gone to the point where Jon Jones has a petition out for his stripping of the undisputed heavyweight championship, where 192,000 people and going have signed for him to get stripped. And now they've been downplaying this number. Jones saying there are 8 billion people in the world, only just under 200,000 people have signed it, kind of diminishing the number. Dana White saying there are over 400 million fans, only 200,000 people want him to get want him to get stripped. how many fans watch these Apex cards? How many fans consistently watch every single fight of every single UFC card? How many people are willing to go to change.org to sign a petition and put all this information in and make an account? Those little things. These are people who legitimately want this to happen. And they're diminishing 200,000 signatures on something like this. Yeah, that's a very notable number. It's a very notable accomplishment. You don't see it ever happen anywhere else. I mean, now, we've wanted so many other people to be stripped. Aljamain Sterling, when he got the title against Peter Yan, there was no petition on him getting stripped of the belt and losing it. Not nowhere near to this caliber. And everybody was losing their minds when Aljamain Sterling faked an injury to get the title. Everybody has lost their minds on several other different title situations. Even when Yuri Prochazka got stripped or Jamal Hill got stripped, people thought it wasn't outrageous because they got injured and they get stripped. But a lot of other champions get interim title shots in their place and they get to hold on to the belt. Similar to Jon Jones when he get pulled out. He ended up pulling out and Tom Aspinall fought the interim title against Sergey Pavlovich. Very, very weird double standard by the UFC. Will we ever get this fight? We don't know. What will Tom Aspinall do? Aspinall's been pretty confident saying that they're past Jon Jones and that the UFC's past Jon Jones and that there's going to be fight news pretty soon. And Aspinall's confident that he's going to be fighting somebody. He has a date, he has a location, and that he's apparently got a fight coming up and the UFC's just going to announce it soon. Aspinall's saying that Jones is no longer fighting him and that Jones is retired. He's confidently, passionately saying on ESPN with DC and Chael Sonnen and in other situations, in other interviews, in other videos, in other clips where he's saying that Jon Jones is retired, that he's got some other opponent that he's going to be fighting for the undisputed title. Dana White saying Tom Aspinall's the guy, and we're here. We don't know what's going to happen still. Dana White said Tuesday in the matchmakers meeting. It's Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we have not seen anything happen yet. So yeah, I don't understand what's going to be happening with this. I wonder what Tom Aspinall is going to be fighting next. If it's not Jon Jones, probably going to be Cyril Gane, who's been holding out. Got a very undeserved win against Volkov, which he did not win, and he might even get a title shot off of that, which is pretty embarrassing if you think how bad the heavyweight division is right now. I feel like Jailton Almeida deserves it, although losing to Curtis Blades. But then would you really get a win over Sergey Spivak and earn a title fight? I don't think so. Nonetheless, like, subscribe, follow MMA_DBM on TikTok. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Follow MMA_DBM on TikTok. That is me. For more daily content, daily UFC live streams, you could clearly tell I have a very articulate game plan when it comes to organization and cleaning up how this looks. Yeah, it's a white background with screenshots and this. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully the YouTube has been decent to those of you who've been watching. Hope you guys have been enjoying it, and hope you guys have been enjoying the TikTok and this content. Let me know if you like these style videos. I'll be doing the same thing, predictions videos, stuff like this. But yeah, I feel like this is a pretty decent video from what people have been telling me, and if it's not, let me know. Let me know I'm an idiot. But yeah, appreciate you guys for being here. Hopefully we get Aspinall versus Jones, and I think Aspinall's going to knock him out if it happens. If not, it is what it is. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys tomorrow in tomorrow's video. Peace out.